That's a heart. She has a heart for Jesus. Well, thank you, Emma. I was looking at this picture. I don't take for granted that this past summer, God put it on someone's heart to buy us a laser projector. I mean, are you thankful for that? I feel like it's a Christmas present. This room is fully lit up. We've got all these lights back here. And isn't that a nice picture? I was just sitting there looking at it going, that's a really good picture in a lit auditorium. So anyway, thank you, God, for putting it on that man's heart to give us this picture. I'm still in Christmas mode. It all went by so fast, so sorry about that, but I'm still thinking Christmas stuff. So we're going to have Christmas sort of today. I want to talk about Jesus coming to tear down barriers, and how I think the nativity scene can help us see that. Now, when we think about the barriers that Jesus came to tear down, clearly the big one, the one we talk about really, probably 90% of sermons are based on, is that he came, to take away sin, right? We take the communion, we recognize he died for our sins, and so his sacrifice on the cross is, in Romans, it's called a propitiation. That's a weird, long word. The word means he is the sacrifice of atonement that turns away the wrath of God. And that's a lot of words. But it just means that God is holy, and for us to be able to be comfortable drawing near to him, something has to be done about sin. And so there's a barrier created by sin. And so, of course, Jesus came to take away that barrier, and we talk about that during the Easter time a lot, right? That's the main theme there. And really probably 95% or more of all the sermons that talk about Jesus taking away the barrier to God has to do with taking away the barrier of sin. But there are other barriers I want to talk about today, and I want to talk about them from the idea of the temple, because the temple, I think, is representative of so many barriers and bad theology. I want to say that have pushed people away from God. Now you think, well, hey, Randy, but God, designed the temple and everything. Well, yes and no. That's what I want to talk about. There are things about the barriers and limitations that God put in place that have to do with the temple. That's true. But there are some that are not, and I want to look at those. So he came to tear down these barriers. Now, I want to say we shouldn't be surprised that this temple might have gotten confused or might have been sending bad messages. We shouldn't be surprised that the theology of it might not be getting across God's purposes, because we've been in the Gospel of Mark, right, for 10 chapters. This message isn't based in the Gospel of Mark. We'll get back to that. But today I wanted to do something different, still related to Christmas. But as we've been going through the Gospel of Mark, haven't we been seeing that the guys who ran this temple, the religious establishment, the religious leaders, haven't we been seeing that they're a mess? As Jesus came, were they one with Jesus in all the things Jesus was doing? Were they right there when Jesus was loving the leper? Were they right there when Jesus was loving the tax collectors, sinners, and eating and drinking with them? Were they right there? Were they right there when Jesus was feeding all the Gentiles in the Decapolis? Were they right with him in all that? Or do we find them challenging him and questioning him and confronting him all along the way with all their questions because they don't want him doing that stuff? Which is it? Right? We've found that the greatest enemy of Jesus in his mission was the religious establishment. It was Satan, but it was Satan in the religious establishment. It wasn't some army of the world. It wasn't those sinners out there who aren't following the Bible. They're not the ones. They're not the ones who are opposing Jesus at every step. It's the Pharisees, it's the Sadducees, it's the Herodians. they're all getting together, and eventually it'll be the priests and the chief priests, right? Those are the ones that decide they're going to kill Jesus. Those are the ones that put him on trial, a fake trial. Those are the ones that ask Rome to put him to death. And so it should be no surprise that we look at a temple system that God initially put in place and see that it's all messed up. We shouldn't be surprised to see that the theology of it and everything they were doing at the time of Jesus, we should expect that it's going to be a mess. And so I want to talk about those barriers that we see happening in regard to the temple. It's going to help us understand what Jesus came to change. Now, first let's talk about the restrictions and barriers that are in place that were intended by God. Okay? Let's look at those. Anybody know what this picture is? Who's the guy? Not by name. What's his function? Very good. This is the high priest. Only the high priest is allowed to go in that second chamber, the second chamber of the temple. And only once a year. He can't go in there anytime he wants. So there's limitations. And you guys stay out. Only this one guy gets to go in here. And what's this big giant, some people call it the God box. What's that thing called? The Ark of the Covenant. And on top of it, you've got these cherubim who's facing each other with their wings outstretched, touching each other. And right there below the cherubim's wings on the top surface of the ark, anybody know what that's called? The mercy seat. That's the mercy seat. That's where the high priest would sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice. That would be the atonement, but only for that year. He had to do it again next year and next year. But ultimately, Jesus would come to be the perfect sacrifice to fulfill all that. But why the restriction? And what did it mean? The problem is, this whole thing had nothing to do with the goodness of that man. There was nothing he could brag about that he was the only one that got to go in there. The separation between him and everybody else had nothing to do with his loftiness and their put-downness. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't about him at all. Everything about the restriction was to represent God's holiness. It was to represent God's holiness and the problem with humanity and sin. And so that priest is only there representing all humanity and the need for a sacrifice to be holy in the presence of God. Nothing about him, everything about God. Nothing about his goodness or righteousness or holiness or worthiness. Nothing about him. Everything about the holiness of God. And so that's this scene in the most holy place. Now, the regular priests can't go in there, and the Levites can't go in there, and the Israelites can't go in there, and the Gentiles can't go in there. They're all restricted. But it's not saying anything about this guy being any more favored to God. How about this room? This is the first chamber. This picture didn't blow up quite as well, but all the stuff is there. In this chamber, priests that were chosen, because there's so many priests, everybody couldn't do it every day. Priests that were chosen would go into this first chamber called the holy place. The chamber we just looked at, this is called the most holy place, where the presence of God is. And then there's a big giant curtain. And then after this is the holy place. And here's where priests that were chosen would go in and they would do the ministry. And they would take care of the menorah. There's a lampstand in there. And those candles were supposed to burn all through the night to show that God's presence was always with Israel. Well, those candles had to be tended to, don't they? Except for Hanukkah, where the light just kept going. Those candles had to be tended to. You had to trim the wicks and make sure it's not all burned out, put a new candle, right? So there was something to do in there. And the candles burning represented that God's presence was always with them. There was also the incense that they were offering. Anybody know what the incense represented? The sacred incense going up to God. A sweet savor representing the prayers of the people. It was just representative of the prayers of the people going up to God. And then the showbread, the bread that was there, 12 loaves representing the tribes of Israel. These loaves were placed there, but every day they had to be replaced. And then the loaves that were there were taken and they would be eaten by the priests. And then this was a regular thing, had to be done every day. And so there was duties in the morning and duties at night. And so this was an ongoing thing. Now, nobody else could go in there. The Levites in general couldn't go in there. The rest of the Israelites couldn't go in there. The women couldn't go in there. Gentiles couldn't go in there. A lot of restrictions about going in there. But none of them have to do with those priests being any better than anybody else. Again, the priests going in there were just representing the congregation, the whole people of God, and their relationship and access to God. They were representative of that. And that God would hear the people's prayers, and that God was present with them. And he was communing with them. It reminded them of the bread that God gave them, to keep them in the wilderness. But there was this, all of this had to do with pointing at who God was to them. None of it had to do with saying, oh, that priest, he's higher and more holy than you, because he's one of the ones who gets to go in there. You hear what I'm saying? It just wasn't about that. It shouldn't have been about that. And then outside of that, you have the court of the priests. A lot of gross stuff happening here, right? You have the butchering of the animals, sacrifices, who gets what meat. I mean, a lot of that stuff going on here. But that's the court of the priests. Nobody else is supposed to go there, right? Everybody's not supposed to invade that space. That's the court of the priests. So restrictions, limitations, barriers, but all of them pointing at the holiness of God and man's ministry to be able to be mediated into the presence of God, so that humanity could participate in the presence of God. Okay? That's all it was. That's not what it became by the time of Jesus. You see? What it became had it just had a different feel to it. Right? We know that these religious leaders and even the priests, we know that these guys got in their heads that they were more favored by God than the rest of y'all. That's how they got in their heads. That they were somehow up here and y'all were down here. You remember the Pharisee in the temple praying? God, I thank you, what? That I'm not like that guy, that tax collector over there. I thank you I'm not like him, because I'm your good one. You know, when Jesus talked about the shepherd who left the 99 to go get the one, you remember it says in that story in Luke 15, he says, for there's more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over what? 99. Anybody know the word? Righteous persons. Plus 10. You get plus 10. There's more rejoicing over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who don't need to repent. How many righteous persons are there that don't need to repent? This should be an easy one. 0. Except Jesus. 0. So who's he talking about? He's talking about the people who think that they are the righteous ones who don't need to repent. And at the beginning of that chapter, Luke 15, it tells us he's talking to the Pharisees, the religious leaders who they thought they were righteous ones. They thought they were elevated above everybody else. How does that make people feel? It makes me think of, and I don't know this firsthand, I only know it from TV shows and stuff and hearing about it. But you know, like in England, if you're any part of the royal family, you have a number. Anybody ever hear that? You have a number? Yeah, like your number might be 127. Why are you 127? Because 127 people have to die for you to be king. Your number might be 82. Because 82 people might have to die for you to be king. And so the lower your number, like 5, you got clout. You're 5, right? Well, you're 497. You're a nobody, basically. Right? There's this way people do, the way they think. I'm way up here because only 9 people have to die and I'll be king, so I'm somebody important. I've got clout. And who are you? You're not even on the list. You don't have a number, right? We do this. They did it. It had infected the temple. It had infected how the temple was understood. And so there's more barriers. Those were the barriers and limits that God had placed. But like I said, he didn't mean that those men were any better than anybody else. In fact, the high priest at the time of Jesus was a jerk. He knew he was doing wrong. He knew Lazarus had been raised from the dead, but he didn't care. He's like, we got to get rid of Jesus or we'll lose our power. He says it. And there were some priests in the Old Testament that were not so good, and their sons, Eli and his sons, and if you know them, they're a mess, stealing from the stuff that's supposed to belong to God. It's not saying anything about them, but this is what they made it about. So there's other barriers represented in Herod's temple by the time Herod's building this temple. Of course, Herod's temple is not the original design. It's close in some ways, but it's not the original. But there's other barriers going on. So this is a picture of the what's called a balustrade. The balustrade is this half wall that goes all the way around the temple. Now, if you're a Gentile, you cannot pass this balustrade. You cannot pass it. There's a sign. It's called a soreg. And the sign says, no foreigner is to enter within the balustrade and the embankment around the sanctuary. Whoever is caught will have himself to blame for his death, which will follow. Is that warm and fuzzy? Does that make you feel all smooth? Or does it make you feel like, hey, God doesn't want you anywhere around here? Going back to this, you see the soreg, it's pointed out. There's the sign. And so if you're a Gentile, you're way back here, and you can't go any further. You're about a football field away from where anything's going on having to do with God. Football field away. How's that feel? It feels like God doesn't want me around. So that's one of the barriers. And then this, also notice, you see the steps? When you enter in, everybody who enters that are allowed to go past the balustrade, okay, they go up steps higher than the Gentiles. You think that's just coincidence? I don't think so. You go up, you go higher than the Gentiles, and now this is the court of the women. The women are allowed to go up these steps into the court of the women, but they're still about 250 feet away from anything that's going on. The women are not allowed closer than that. And in fact, this is a representation of what the women can see. Now, I've talked about this gate before. This is Nicanor. And for some reason, I had seen some depictions of it. I hadn't seen this one before. But I'd seen them, and the gate was like brown, and I thought it was made of wood, and I was wrong. Interesting, I found out this week. I was looking more at it. It's not mentioned in the Bible. It's mentioned in Josephus and another place. But Nicanor gate was bronze. And it was like 30 feet high. And up steps. And so imagine you're a woman and you've come to the temple to be part of it all, but everything's up higher than you, and it's behind this giant wall with a bronze gate that you can't see through. How do you feel about that? Everything about God's happening on the other side. And where are you at? You're out here. Listen, I thought of something this week. It hit me because I realized it was a bronze gate. And I asked Chat to help me with this because I wanted to figure out if anybody ever noted this before. And of course, in theology, in the scholars, they've noted, they of course compare the whole temple thing with heaven and with God, because the Bible sort of says that. Moses is told when they build the tabernacle, they're to build it according to the pattern they see in heaven. Is that right? Anybody remember that? So they're building an example of heaven. They're building it on earth. So they're building God's heavenly house on earth. And it looks like by the time of this temple, they decided to make it an ascent up into the heavenly place. That's why you go upstairs, to get higher and higher and higher till you eventually get to God's house. But that bronze gate, why? It's not in the Bible. They just decided to do this. They put that gate there, that bronze gate, huge gate, where nobody can see what's going on the other side. The women, the Gentiles, they can't be a part of it in any way. It's a bronze gate. I said to myself, that's really curious, that as you go up and up and up toward the heavenly place, and then there's this bronze barrier, and on the other side is the house of God. That's really curious to me, because this is Genesis' depiction of the creation. It's a depiction that people would have understood at the time. It's not written for us in science. But this is a depiction of the way Genesis describes the creation. And what I want you to notice is where it says rakia or firmament. Do you see that? Rakia, I may have told you this before. Rakia it's the word for firmament. Now, firmament, does that sound like air? When you talk about firmament, doesn't seem like air, right? Firmament, the word rakia means a hammered, thin, bronze dome. They believe there's a hammered, thin, this is the way the ancient Near East saw it. There's a hammered, thin, bronze dome that God fixed to separate the earthly things and the earthly heavenly waters, whatever, all these waters, from the heavenly waters. So this dome is there, and you have to open it to let the waters of the heavens come in. Right? This is the way the Bible uses accommodative language, so people of the ancient Near East, it wasn't trying to give them a science textbook. It was just trying to say God fixed a firmament, something around the earth to hold it in. We would call it like an atmosphere or something, but they weren't doing that then. But what I want you to notice is, it's very curious that circle, the dark green circle that goes like this, the dome, that's bronze. There's a bronze barrier between the things of the earth and the things of heaven. Up there it says chambers of heaven. There's a bronze barrier in this depiction in Genesis. So as you go up and up and up to where you're going to go into, in order to get into the heavens with God, you have to get through the bronze barrier. Are you following me? Now look at what they did with the temple. In order to get into the presence of God, where the house of God is, you've got to get through the bronze door. I don't think that's coincidence. Chat couldn't find that anybody had made the connection, but Chat really loved it. Thought it was very sound. And I think so too. I don't think it's an accident that everything steps going up and up and up to the house of God, but you've got to get through the bronze barrier to be in the heavenly place. And so what does that mean to all the women and the Gentiles who are on this side? You're not invited into the realm of the heavenly place. You're not invited into the proximity of God. You're out there. You're still out there. You're on the other side of this barrier. You're still in the earthly place. But we, and of course this will be the Israelite men, who are all, intact. You have to be intact as well. to be able to go past there. Only we are allowed in the very presence of God. I know that looks weird and a lot of stuff there. This is simply the way God designed it right here. This is how God designed it. And what I want you to notice is that it's completely flat. It's flat ground. If we were out there with Israel in the wilderness and we had set up the tabernacle, it would just be flat ground. We'd put the tent. You guys ever set up tents in the Boy Scouts? Do you look for a hilly place that's all slanted and... No? You're going to put up a big tent. You looking for a hill or something? Well, yeah, you want it high, but you want it flat, right? This is a depiction of where the tent would be set up, and all of the tribes would be around it. This is how it's designed in the Bible. The tabernacle, which the temple was supposed to be created from. There's no other instructions for temple building except this. So whatever the temple does, it's supposed to do this. Well, what does this do? Well, here you have the tabernacle with the holy place and the most holy place, and we know about those limitations. And then you have the tribe of Levi all around. Can you see the tribe of Levi is all the way around? They're the priests and the Levites who represented the cities of refuge and the ministries. So that's all the ministry. They didn't get any land. They didn't get an inheritance. They got the priesthood. So that's the Levites. And then what do we have around the Levites? What's all those things? Those are the 12 tribes camped around the tabernacle. And if you were in the tribe of Reuben, right here with the 46,600, that was your whole clan and all your stuff. If you were in Reuben, camped right there, you would have your husbands and your wives and your children and your animals and your servants, and some of your servants might be the Canaanites who you kicked out of, or defeated along the way. You might have Gentile servants. All of you were right there. Everybody. Right there. All the same level. You understand the difference? Everybody's accepted that close to God, and the only reason there's priests and temple restrictions is not to say anything about anybody except that they represent humanity, which cannot be close to God without the atonement. That's all it's supposed to say. It wasn't supposed to be different levels going higher and higher, and we're better than you, and we're the greatest. And it's no wonder. This is the irony. Those that thought that they were... Let me go all the way back. I might have just gone forward one. Let me see. No. Sorry. Those who were in this area, who were able to go way in there and be in the very thick of it all, the court of the Israelites, which is on the other side of Nicanor, and all those priests and all that, it's just ironic that all of those who felt like they were in the presence of God were actually the furthest away from God. We see that in the ministry of Jesus. Furthest away. And also, I want you to know this. In that temple, there was no Ark of the Covenant. It wasn't there. It had been gone for almost 600 years. When Babylon came in and destroyed the city and the temple, it disappeared. And it never came back. That temple's empty. Jesus said, "Behold, your house is left to you desolate." He wasn't prophesying that that's going to happen. It was the truth. There's nobody home. They're just playing house. Playing dress up. They're LARPing. Anybody know what LARPing is? I saw these guys one time in the park and I found out there's LARPing. That's all they're doing. They're just playing Civil War reenactments around here, right? That's what they got around here, right? It's just playing house. God's not in there. It's empty. They're not anywhere near God. Listen, when Jesus comes, where do we find him? Smoozing with all those guys? Where do we find him? We find him out there. Not trapped up in this temple. We find him out there with the people. So that's why I brought up the nativity scene. Just think of what this speaks in light of that temple thing. Jesus said to the Pharisees, he said, destroy this temple and I'll rebuild it in 3 days. Remember he said that? What was he talking about? The temple of his body. He wasn't talking about that big building. Jesus identified himself as the temple. He's the temple of God. The very presence of God on earth is Jesus. And where do we find him? Did he have to come as a baby like this? Could God have done it any other way? Could he have come as some kind of, huge giant, Godzilla kind of creature? Could he have come as some giant warrior, bigger than everybody else? Gigantor, anybody remember him? I don't know why that name just came to me, but when I was a kid, there was a Gigantor, 10 times the size of a man. Some of you have no idea what I'm talking about, but some of you remember Gigantor. But anyway, he could have come in any way, right? He came as a little baby. That's the temple of God. And at the temple of God, are there men? Yeah, we know at least Joseph was there, and we know shepherds were there. And after a while, we know that some Gentile wise men, Gentiles, were there. Are there women there? Well, we know Mary's there. And again, the shepherds went out and told everybody what had happened, and it said they pondered it in their hearts. Some of them might have come to see. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that everybody was told that this had happened, and angels in the heavens and the holy, and that I think some people would have come to see. And so all these people, and probably animals. We're in a feeding trough for animals, probably animals nearby. Jesus coming in a manger like this, it's the exact antithesis of everything that was happening over there. They had gotten it so wrong that God's not trying to fix that thing. He's doing something new. This temple of God has come among the people. And like I said, we've seen it in the Gospel of Mark. He's going around hugging people in the name of God. He doesn't have to touch a leper, but he does. He doesn't have to stop and call the woman daughter. She's already healed. He can press on and go help the child that's dying. But he stops to tell her daughter because he's trying to give her a hug. He doesn't have to travel all the way up into Tyre and Sidon to see a Gentile woman to help her. But he's trying to show that God's giving the Gentiles hugs. Jesus went around spreading the love of God. And it wasn't to those guys who were up there close to the temple. It was to everybody. All those who'd been disenfranchised and told that God doesn't care about you. Jesus went to them first. Because they're the ones who would love to have a relationship with God, but they were pushed away. Now I want to tell you that, and I can't go into all the different ways we do it, not from a podium. If you want to get into it, come into the Bible study on Sunday mornings, and we'll tackle some of the tough things. But there's a lot of bad doctrines today. Bad doctrines in the church that push people away. And it's important that we figure those out and correct them. Because we want to represent God like this, who loves us so much he comes to us. Does anybody look terrified in the presence of God here? The manger, it just shows us God has come to love. He is love. He's come to love and let you know you're loved. So that's a message for you today. If that message stirs your heart and you want to know more about God, study about God, increase your relationship with God. If you have anything you need to pray about, you'd like the church to be involved in that, we'd love to do that with you and for you. If you have any need at all, we have a time that we sing a song, and you're welcome to come talk to us about it, and we'd love to be part of that with you. So you can come now as we sing a song.